There are moments in your life that feel like a perfect photograph, a snapshot of pure, unadulterated happiness. The morning of my 28th birthday was one of those moments. I woke up to the smell of fresh coffee and the feeling of my fiancé, Mark, kissing my shoulder. The sunlight was streaming through the bedroom window of the apartment we'd made a home, and in that warm, quiet moment, I felt a sense of contentment so profound it was a physical presence. I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. Looking back, that's the cruelest part, the sheer, blissful ignorance of it all. I was living in the final, beautiful, sun-drenched moments of my old life, and I had absolutely no idea that I was just hours away from a betrayal so complete, it would burn that life to the ground. Have you ever had people in your life that you trusted so completely, so implicitly, that you would have bet your life on their loyalty? I had two, my fiancé, Mark, and my best friend, Jessica. And I was about to lose that bet in the most spectacular, soul-crushing way imaginable. If you've ever been blindsided by the people you trusted most, hit that like button, because honey, you are not alone. Happy birthday, beautiful, Mark murmured into my hair. He was already dressed for work, holding a mug of coffee for me, made exactly the way I liked it. It was one of the million little things he did that made me love him. He was a man who paid attention. I'd met him 2 years before, at a networking event I had almost skipped. He was a financial analyst, ambitious and impossibly handsome. With a laugh that could make you forget your own name, he pursued me with a gentle, charming persistence that I found irresistible. He wasn't just interested in the surface-level me, he was fascinated by the mechanics of my mind. He loved that I ran my own web development company, that I could spend hours lost in code, that I had built my career from the ground up. With him, I felt truly seen. Our relationship was easy, comfortable, and full of laughter. He was my biggest cheerleader, and I was his. We were a team, building a future together, a future that was set to officially begin in just 4 short months. On our wedding day, my best friend Jessica was supposed to be standing beside me on that day as my maid of honor. We had a friendship that spanned 2 decades. We'd met in 3rd grade and had been inseparable ever since. We navigated the treacherous waters of middle school, survived the drama of high school, were roommates in college, and held each other's hands through our first real heartbreaks. She knew every secret, every dream, every insecurity I had. She was less a friend and more a sister, an extension of my own soul. When Mark proposed, Jessica was the first person I called, screaming with joy. She had been ecstatic for me. Finally, she'd shrieked. "It's about time he locked you down. I can't wait to plan the most epic bachelorette party ever." And she had been a dream maid of honor. She'd gone with me to try on dresses, helped me choose floral arrangements, and spent hours listening to me agonize over invitation fonts. Her support seemed as solid and as real as the 4-carat diamond on my finger. That birthday morning, as I sipped my coffee, Mark sat on the edge of the bed. "So," he said, a playful glint in his eye, "I have some instructions for you today. First, you are not allowed to do any work. Second, you are not allowed to make any plans." "Oh, really?" I said, raising an eyebrow. "And why is that?" "Because," he said, leaning in to kiss me, "your only job today is to relax and be pampered. And then tonight, you have to be back here by 8 o'clock sharp for your surprise party." I gasped. "A surprise party? You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," he said. "You've been so stressed with work and wedding planning. You deserve to be celebrated. Jess has been a huge help. She's been organizing everything with me. It's going to be great." The thought of them, the 2 people I loved most in the world, conspiring to throw me a party filled my heart with a warm, effervescent joy. Just then, the doorbell rang. "And that," Mark said, grinning, "will be phase 1 of your birthday surprise." He went to the door, and a moment later, Jessica burst into the bedroom, holding a gift bag and radiating an infectious energy. "Happy birthday, you beautiful bride-to-be," she squealed, throwing her arms around me. "Get dressed. You and I have an appointment." She handed me the gift bag. Inside was a gift certificate for a full day of treatments at the most luxurious spa in the city. The opulence package. It read, massage, facial, manicure, pedicure, the works. Jess, this is too much, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Nonsense, she said, waving her hand dismissively. You absolutely deserve it. Mark and I cooked this up last week. It gets you out of the house for the whole day, so we have time to decorate and get everything perfect for your party tonight. Now, chop chop, our massages are at 10. Her smile was so bright, so genuine. She seemed just as excited as I was. We hugged again, a tight, familiar embrace that I had known for 20 years. It felt like coming home. The day at the spa was pure, decadent bliss. We were wrapped in fluffy white robes, our faces covered in soothing masks, our feet soaking in warm, scented water. We gossiped, we laughed, we planned. So, have you finished your vows yet? She asked as we sat in plush armchairs, our nails being painted a delicate shade of bridal pink. Almost, I confessed. I'm struggling with the part about trust and partnership. It's hard to put into words how much I trust him. You know how safe he makes me feel. Oh, I know, she said, her eyes meeting mine in the mirror. She had a look of such sincere, empathetic understanding on her face. The way he looks at you, Clara. It's like you're the only person in the world. Everyone deserves a love like that. We talked about her maid of honor dress. We talked about the seating chart for the wedding. We talked about the ridiculous name she wanted to give her future dog. It was a normal, perfect, best friend day. Every word, every laugh, every shared look was another stitch in the rich tapestry of our friendship. I didn't know that she was, at that very moment, meticulously and methodically plunging a knife into that tapestry, shredding it to pieces right before my eyes. We spent hours there, disconnected from the world. My phone was tucked away in a locker. I was in a bubble of pampered relaxation, my mind filled with happy thoughts of the evening to come. A party, with all my friends. A celebration of my life, planned by the two people who made that life feel so complete. Around 6 o'clock, we were finally finished. I felt like a new woman, my skin glowing, my body relaxed, my mind blissfully calm. We hugged at the spa's entrance. Okay, have the best time tonight, she said, squeezing me tight. Don't you dare come home before 8 o'clock. We need every minute to get the surprise ready. It's going to be perfect. I love you, Jess, I said, my heart overflowing with gratitude. I love you too, Clara, she said, her voice full of a warmth I didn't know was a lie. Happy birthday. She waved as I got into my car. I watched her walk away, my best friend, my maid of honor, my sister. I had 2 hours to kill before I was allowed to go home. I drove aimlessly for a while, my favorite music blasting through the speakers, singing along at the top of my lungs. I stopped and bought myself a new dress for the party, a beautiful, celebratory dress. I felt giddy with anticipation. At 10 minutes to 8, I was parked down the street from my apartment building. I took a moment to just sit in my car and smile. I thought about my life, about the incredible man I was going to marry, about the amazing friend who was my rock, about the party waiting for me behind my own front door. Everything was perfect. It was the kind of perfect you see in movies, the kind you don't think is real until it happens to you. Finally, at 8 o'clock on the dot, I got out of my car. I walked up the path to my building, my keys in my hand. I could see that the lights were off in our living room, just as they would be for a surprise party. My heart was beating a happy, excited rhythm against my ribs. I slid my key into the lock. I turned it. I took a deep breath, a smile already spreading across my face, ready to be surprised. I pushed the door open, and the world didn't just end. It inverted. It shattered into a million, jagged, unrecognizable pieces. The photograph wasn't just ruined. It was set on fire. I stood at the threshold of my own home, a brilliant, happy smile plastered on my face, my body thrumming with anticipation. I took a deep breath, ready to be enveloped by the cheerful roar of my friends and the warmth of a surprise party planned by the two people I loved most. I pushed the door fully open and stepped inside. The first thing that hit me was the silence. It was wrong. It wasn't the hushed, expectant silence that precedes a shout of surprise. This was a heavy, thick, awkward silence. The room wasn't dark. It was softly lit by the lamps I had picked out, casting a warm glow on a scene of pure, surreal horror. My brain, primed for a celebration, couldn't process what my eyes were seeing. It was like walking into a photograph that had been expertly and maliciously doctored. The room was full of people. Yes, our friends were all there, my friends from college, his friends from work, the couples we went out with, but they weren't hiding behind furniture with party poppers. They were standing frozen against the walls, like unwilling statues in a bizarre museum exhibit. Their faces were a gallery of shock, discomfort, and horrified pity. A few of them were staring at the floor, at the ceiling, at anything but the scene unfolding in the center of the room. And then my eyes followed their horrified gazes to the center of my living room, to the rug I had spent 3 weeks searching for. And I saw him. Mark, my Mark. He was down on one knee. His back was to me, but I knew his posture. I knew the line of his shoulders, the way he held his head. He was holding a small, open ring box. And the person he was holding it up to, the person he was looking at with an expression of intense, loving adoration, was not me. It was Jessica, my best friend, my maid of honor. She was standing before him, her hands covering her mouth in a perfect imitation of shocked delight. She was wearing a new dress I'd never seen before, a beautiful emerald green that brought out the flecks of gold in her eyes, the same eyes that had looked at me with such seeming love and sincerity just 2 hours before at the spa. The scene was so fundamentally wrong, so completely impossible, that my mind simply refused to accept it. This is a joke. A small rational part of my brain insisted. A really, really weird and elaborate prank. Any second now. They'll all jump up and yell, "Surprise!" and we'll all laugh about this. But then I heard his voice. My blood went cold. "And I know this is sudden, Jess," Mark was saying, his voice thick with the same earnest emotion he had used on that mountaintop. "But I can't live a lie anymore. These last few months with you, they've been the most real moments of my life." Months. The word hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't a sudden impulse. This was a long-running affair. "You are the most incredible woman I have ever known," he continued. And my mind splintered. Because he was using my lines. The words he had said to me. For her, it was a recycled script, my own love story, plagiarized and performed for my replacement. "You see me in a way no one else does. Please, Jessica, make me the happiest man alive. Will you marry me?" I saw Jessica's eyes fill with tears. But these weren't the tears of a surprised woman. They were the tears of a triumphant one. This was her victory lap. She looked down at Mark, and then her gaze lifted, sweeping across the room full of our horrified friends. And that's when she saw me. I was standing in the doorway, half in the hall, half in the room. Her eyes met mine for a split second. Her triumphant smile faltered, replaced by a flash of pure panic. The deer caught in the headlights. She hadn't expected me here, not yet. The surprise wasn't for me at all. My absence was supposed to be the surprise. They had gathered our friends, our life, into my home to announce their love, believing I was safely out of the way. The party wasn't for me. It was for them. The cruelty of it, the sheer, calculated, sociopathic cruelty of it, was breathtaking. But then, just as quickly, the panic in her eyes was gone, replaced by something else. A hard, defiant glint, a challenge. Yes, her look said, "I won." In that moment, a strange and preternatural calm descended upon me. The roaring in my ears stopped. The frantic, disbelieving thoughts in my head went silent. It was the kind of calm that comes in the eye of a hurricane, a moment of absolute, terrifying clarity while the world is being ripped to shreds around you. I saw every detail with a crystalline focus, the way Mark was still kneeling, confused by the shift in Jessica's expression, the way our friend, Liam, was shaking his head slowly, disgust written all over his face, the way Jessica was wearing the gold locket I had given her for her last birthday. I was supposed to scream. I was supposed to cry. I was supposed to run into the room and create the dramatic, messy scene they both deserved. But I didn't. My body, acting on some instinct for self-preservation that my shattered mind couldn't access, began to move. My hand, which was still on the doorknob, slowly, gently, began to pull the door closed. I didn't slam it. I didn't make a sound. I just pulled it shut until I heard the soft, final click of the latch engaging. The sound of that click was the sound of a door closing on my entire life. I turned around. I walked away from my own front door, my own home, my own party. I walked down the hallway, my steps even and silent. I walked past a neighbor who smiled and said, "Happy birthday." Clara and I think I smiled back. I walked out of the front entrance of the building, into the cool night air. The world outside was exactly as I had left it just moments before. Cars were driving by. People were walking their dogs. The city was humming along, completely oblivious to the fact that my universe had just imploded. I got into my car. The new dress I had bought, the celebratory birthday dress, felt like a ridiculous costume. I sat there, my hands on the steering wheel, staring at my own reflection in the dark windshield. And I saw a stranger, a woman with a dead hollow look in her eyes. I started the car, I put it in drive, and I just drove. I don't know where I went. I drove for an hour, maybe 2. I made random turns, my body going through the motions of operating a vehicle, while my mind was a white-hot static of pain and disbelief. The cold, preternatural calm that had gotten me out of the apartment began to crack, and then it shattered. And the pain that came flooding in was a physical thing. It was a crushing weight on my chest, a fire in my throat. I couldn't breathe. I pulled the car over into a deserted industrial park, slammed it into park, and the sound that finally ripped its way out of my throat was not a scream. It was a raw, guttural, animal sound of pure agony. The betrayal. It wasn't just one betrayal. It was 1,000 betrayals, all wrapped into one monstrous act. It was every secret I had ever told Jessica, every vulnerability I had shared. It was every "I love you" Mark had ever whispered to me. It was every future plan we had ever made. It was all a lie, a long, elaborate, soul-destroying lie. They hadn't just cheated on me, they had conspired. They had used my love, my trust, and my own birthday as weapons against me. They had gathered an audience to witness my execution, not even realizing I would be there to see it myself. The premeditation of it, the sheer sociopathic level of planning and deception, was what truly broke me. I sobbed until my body ached, until my throat was raw, until there were no tears left to cry. I was left with a vast, echoing emptiness. My fiancé was gone. My best friend was gone. My home was no longer my home. My past was a lie, and my future was a blank, terrifying void. I sat there for hours, in a strange car in a strange part of the city, the engine off, the world outside dark and silent. The woman who had woken up that morning, so happy, so loved, so blissfully ignorant, was dead. She had died at 8:02 p.m., right in her own doorway, and as the first, pale, gray light of dawn began to touch the sky, a new woman began to stir in the wreckage. She was a stranger to me. She was hollowed out and broken, but as the sun came up, a tiny, cold, hard spark ignited in the deepest, most desolate part of her soul. It was the kind of spark that doesn't just bring light, it was the kind of spark that starts fires. I don't know how long I drove. The sun was a pale, watery gray in the sky when I finally recognized a street sign. My body, on some deep, autonomic level, had been searching for the only safe harbor it knew, my brother's house. Daniel was my older brother by 5 years, my polar opposite, and my rock. Where I was a planner who trusted too easily, he was a skeptical, pragmatic carpenter who trusted almost no one. He had always been polite to Mark, but I'd sensed a reserve, a quiet watchfulness. He'd once described Mark as being too smooth. Like a polished stone, I had dismissed it as cynicism. Now I realized it was wisdom. I must have looked like a ghost on his doorstep. It was 6 a.m. I was still in my party dress from the night before, my makeup smeared, my hair a mess, my eyes swollen to slits. He opened the door, a cup of coffee in his hand, and the jovial well. "Look what the cat dragged in" died on his lips. His face went from sleepy to instantly, fiercely alert. "Clara, what the hell happened?" He pulled me inside without waiting for an answer. He sat me down on his worn leather sofa, wrapped a heavy woolen blanket around my shoulders, and put a mug of hot, sweet tea in my hands. I couldn't stop shaking. I tried to tell him, The words wouldn't come out right. They were broken, jagged pieces of the horror I had witnessed. My party. It wasn't. Mark was with Jessica. He was proposing. Daniel didn't rush me. He just listened, his face growing darker and colder with every fractured sentence. He didn't question me. He didn't ask if I was sure. He just watched my face. And he knew. He believed me instantly. And in that moment, I loved him more than I had ever loved anyone. And then, my phone, which I'd left on the coffee table, began to buzz. It was a text from Mark, then another, then a call, which I ignored. Then a text from Jessica. The phone buzzed and buzzed, a frantic, angry insect demanding my attention. It was the sound of the liars realizing their audience had left the theater. Daniel's jaw clenched. "Don't look at it," he said, his voice a low growl. But I couldn't help it. I was still in shock, still operating on some level of disbelief. A sick, tiny part of me thought there must be an explanation, a terrible, insane explanation. But an explanation nonetheless. I reached for the phone. The screen was a timeline of a gaslighting campaign in real time. Mark 7:05 a.m. Clara. Where are you? I woke up and you were gone. Everyone was so worried last night. Please call me. Mark 7:06 a.m. Are you okay? I'm freaking out here. Just tell me you're safe. Jessica 7:10 a.m. Clara, please answer your phone. I am so worried about you. What happened? Why did you leave your own party? I stared at the messages, my mind unable to comprehend the sheer, breathtaking audacity of their performance. They were pretending they were the worried ones. They were acting as if I was the one whose behavior was confusing and erratic. They're lying, I whispered, showing the phone to Daniel. Of course, they're lying, he said, his voice filled with contempt. They're trying to build their narrative, the story where you're the unstable one who ran off for no reason. As if on cue, my phone buzzed again. A long text from Mark. Mark, 7:15 a.m. Okay, I think I know what this is about, babe. You completely misunderstood what you saw. It was a prank. A stupid prank on everyone. Jess is taking an acting class, and I was helping her rehearse a proposal scene for a play she's in. We were trying to see if we could fool everyone. It was supposed to be a joke. It went way too far. And I am so sorry it upset you. Please come home so I can explain everything. I love you. A play? An acting class. The lie was so absurd, so insulting to my intelligence, that it was almost comical. He was throwing anything at the wall, hoping something would stick. Then came Jessica's follow-up. Jessica 7:18 a.m. Clara. You need to call me. Mark told me you left and you won't answer. You know I've always wanted to try acting. We've talked about it. Mark was just helping me out. You've always been so supportive of my dreams. How could you think it was real? You're my best friend. You've completely ruined what was supposed to be a fun night by running off and making everyone worry. You're breaking my heart. The blame shifting, the guilt tripping, the attempt to paint herself as the victim. I had ruined the night. I was breaking her heart. The manipulation was so textbook, so blatant. It was almost impressive. The final volley came from Mark 10 minutes later, after his calls went straight to voicemail. His tone had shifted from feigned concern to outright anger. Mark 7:30 a.m. Fine. Be that way. I'm trying to apologize for a stupid joke and you're acting like a child. You are being completely hysterical and irrational. And you're embarrassing both me and Jess. Call me when you decide to grow up. Daniel took the phone from my trembling hands. His face was a thundercloud. That's it, he said, his voice dangerously low. We're done. His large, capable fingers moved across my screen. He opened Mark's contact. He pressed block. He did the same for Jessica. The buzzing stopped. Silence. You are not to speak to those people again. Clara, he said, his voice firm but gentle. Not now. Maybe not ever. They are poison. You need to detox. He put the phone away. Out of my sight. He refilled my tea. And then he just sat with me. A silent, solid presence in the quiet of his living room. He didn't offer platitudes or easy answers. He just gave me a safe space to fall apart. And as I sat there, wrapped in my brother's blanket, the full, crushing weight of reality began to sink in. deeper than the initial shock had allowed. With the noise of their lies silenced, the painful work of introspection began. My mind started to sift through the wreckage of the last few months, looking for the clues I had missed, and they were everywhere. I remembered about 2 months ago, Jessica had casually mentioned that Mark was thinking of leaving his job. He's not happy there, she'd said. He wants to do something more meaningful. I had been worried, but she had reassured me. Don't worry, he's a genius. He'll land on his feet. She wasn't just his confidant, she was his co-planner. I remembered the times Mark would be texting and would angle his phone away when I entered the room. Just work stuff. He'd mutter, I, who had trusted him completely, had never questioned it. I remembered an afternoon of wedding planning, sitting with Jessica in my living room, surrounded by bridal magazines. I had been talking about my fears, my insecurities about the wedding, about living up to the expectations of his family. Don't worry, she had said, taking my hand. Mark loves you more than anything. I'll be right by your side to help you handle everything. That's what best friends are for. She had been lying to my face, using my own insecurities to further her deception. The spa day, the surprise party, it had all been her idea. She had masterminded my removal from my own home. She had known exactly where I would be, and what time I was meant to return. She wasn't just a passive participant in the affair. She was the architect of my humiliation. The pieces clicked into place, one after another, each one a fresh wave of nausea. This wasn't a whirlwind romance that had just sprung up between them. This had been a long, slow, calculated campaign. They had been living a completely separate life together, right under my nose. They had laughed at me. They had pitied me. They had used my love and my trust as a cover for their affair. I thought about the friends in that room. Had any of them known, or were they all just as blindsided as I was? The looks on their faces, they had looked horrified, trapped. They were victims in this too. In a way, Mark and Jessica had used them as props in their sick little play. The tears had finally stopped. The deep, racking sobs had subsided into a cold, hollow emptiness. The woman who had believed in fairy tales, in soulmates, in the unbreakable bond of friendship, had died in that doorway, and a new woman was slowly, painfully being born in her place. This new woman was not soft. She was not trusting. She was forged in the fire of an unimaginable betrayal. I looked over at my brother, who was watching me with worried, protective eyes. They used my living room, I said, my voice a dead flat monotone. They stood on my rug and used my champagne glasses, and they took my life and tried to make it their own. Daniel's jaw tightened. Yeah, he said, they did. They think I'm broken, I continued, my voice gaining a strange, new strength. They think I'm a hysterical, emotional wreck who has run off to cry in a corner. It's okay if you are, he said gently. You have every right to be. Oh, I was, I said, and I finally met his eyes. And what he saw there made him sit up a little straighter. The grief was still there, a vast black ocean. But on the surface of that ocean, something new was beginning to glitter. It was cold, and it was sharp, but I'm not anymore. The tears were gone, the shock had passed, and in the quiet of my brother's house, I finally understood. They hadn't just broken my heart, they had declared war on me, and I was not going to let them win. For 3 days, I existed in a state of suspended animation at my brother's house. I slept on his sofa, wrapped in the same woolen blanket, and moved through the rooms like a ghost. The initial, raw agony had subsided into a vast, gray, hollow ache. Daniel was my keeper. He fed me. He made me tea. And most importantly, he guarded the silence, letting me process the wreckage of my life at my own pace. But on the 4th morning, something shifted. I woke up, and the grief was still there, but it had a new companion, a cold, sharp, crystalline rage. The shock had worn off, and the sheer, calculated injustice of it all began to burn. They hadn't just broken my heart. They had robbed me. They had conspired to steal my future, my home, my friend, my love, and I realized, with a sudden, startling clarity, that being a victim was a state of mind, not a permanent condition. I need my laptop, I said to Daniel. My voice sounded different, stronger. He looked at me, a flicker of something new in his eyes. He saw the shift. "You got it," he said. "No questions asked." My first act as a woman reborn from the ashes of her old life was not emotional. It was practical. It was strategic. I logged into my bank's website. The one I now knew was an empty well, and I found the customer service number. I did the same for my credit cards. For the next hour, I was on the phone, my voice calm and firm, a woman in complete control. "Yes, I'd like to report fraudulent activity and freeze all my accounts immediately," I said again and again. I reported my cards as stolen. I changed every password, every security question. I systematically and methodically built a digital fortress around the ruins of my finances. With every call, with every password changed, I felt a piece of my power returning. When I was done, I looked at Daniel. "I need a lawyer," I said, "not a good one. I need a shark." Daniel, who knew people, just nodded. "I know a guy who knows a woman." Her name was Evelyn Reed. She was a legend in the city's legal circles, a high-powered civil litigator with a reputation for being a brilliant, relentless, and terrifyingly expensive lioness in the courtroom. Her office was a minimalist expanse of glass and steel that screamed power. Ms. Reed herself was in her late 40s, dressed in a suit so sharp it could have cut glass. Her dark hair pulled back in a severe, elegant bun. She didn't offer me tea or sympathy. She offered me a chair and an intimidatingly direct stare. "Daniel Vance says you have a problem," she said, her voice a low, precise instrument. "He tells me it involves a dual betrayal and potential fraud. Let's not waste time. Tell me everything." So I did. I laid out the whole, sordid story, the loving relationship, the trusted best friend, the surprise party, the proposal, the gaslighting texts. I told the story without tears, my voice flat and clinical. As if I were describing a case study, she listened without interruption, her steepled fingers pressed against her lips, her eyes never leaving my face. When I finished, she didn't say, "I'm so sorry you went through that." She said something much, much better. "Good," she said, a dangerous glint in her eye. "The emotional betrayal is devastating, Ms. Vance, but it is not, in itself, actionable. The financial betrayal, however, that is where we will destroy them." For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope that felt less like wishful thinking and more like a strategy. "I need access to all of your financial records for the last 6 months," she commanded. "Bank statements, credit card statements, business accounts, everything. My forensic accountant and I are going to conduct a full financial autopsy. We will find every penny they stole." The next week was a deep, painful dive into the anatomy of their deception. We sat in her glass-walled conference room, a box of my financial statements on the table between us. And piece by piece, we uncovered the full extent of their crimes. It was worse than I had imagined. The first thing we found was the ring, a charge for $22,000 to a high-end, custom jeweler. It was dated 2 months prior. I remembered that day perfectly. Mark had called me from work, saying he was stuck in an all-day board meeting and wouldn't be home for dinner. He had been lying. He had been on the other side of town, using my money to buy an engagement ring for my best friend. The thought that I had probably felt sorry for him that day, thinking he was working so hard, made me feel physically ill. Then came the apartment. Miss Reed's investigator quickly uncovered a lease agreement for a new luxury 2-bedroom apartment, signed by both Mark and Jessica, the security deposit and first month's rent. A sum of $12,500 had been paid via a wire transfer from my savings account. The memo line, written by Mark, was a masterpiece of casual cruelty wedding venue deposit. He had disguised the funding of his new love nest as an expense for our wedding. They were building a new life together, I whispered, staring at the transfer confirmation, using the bricks from mine. "It gets worse," Ms. Reed said, her voice grim. She pushed my business bank statements in front of me. "As a business owner, you'll see this faster than I will. Look at your vendor payments for the last 4 months." I scanned the list of payments I had authorized, payments Mark had prepared for my approval. I saw our usual vendors' web hosting services, software licenses, freelance contractors. But then I saw 3 new ones I didn't recognize. Innovate Solutions, LLC, Apex Digital Ventures, Keystone Consulting. The payments were regular, ranging from $3,000 to $5,000 each. I don't know these companies, I said, a cold dread seeping into my bones. That's because they don't exist, Missy Craw. Reed said, they're shell corporations. We traced the articles of incorporation. The first two were registered to your fiancé. The third was registered to Jessica. He wasn't just stealing your personal savings, Mrs. Vance. He was actively embezzling from your company, and he made you sign the checks. The depth of the deception, the sheer, calculated malice of it, left me breathless. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was a long-term, strategic campaign to defraud me on every possible level. He hadn't just cheated on me. He had treated me like a bank to be robbed, a business to be plundered. This is excellent, Miss Reed said, a chillingly satisfied smile on her face. This elevates it from simple fraud to corporate embezzlement. The penalties are significantly more severe. Finally, she pulled out a copy of the lease for the apartment I had shared with Mark, the apartment where he had proposed to Jessica. I took the liberty of pulling this. She said, "Whose name is on it?" I looked at it. "Just mine," I said. "I had the apartment before I met him. He moved in with me. We never got around to adding him to the lease." Miss Reed's smile widened. She tapped the document with a long, red-painted nail, and this, she said, is our primary leverage. This is the stage for our final act. They are not his tenants. They have no legal right to be there. They are, in the cold, hard eyes of the law, nothing more than squatters in your property. We spent the rest of the afternoon crafting our counterattack. It was not a plea for mercy or a negotiation. It was a declaration of war. First, the civil lawsuit. We would sue for the full amount of the stolen personal funds, the embezzled business funds, punitive damages for the calculated fraud, and all legal fees. The number was astronomical. Second, the restraining order, a temporary order, effective immediately, preventing either of them from contacting me, my family, or my employees. And third, the master stroke, the eviction, not a friendly letter, but a formal, legal, unassailable 30-day eviction notice, to be served by a process server. We won't just mail it, Miss Reed said, her eyes gleaming. There is an art to these things. We need to choose our moment, a moment of maximum impact and public humiliation, a moment that will strip them of the one thing they have left the illusion that they have gotten away with it. I left her office that evening with a heavy leather briefcase full of legal documents. I walked through the city, which was now glittering with evening lights. I was no longer a ghost. I was no longer a victim. I was a woman with a plan, a formidable ally, and a briefcase full of justice. They thought they had broken me. They thought they had taken everything. But they had made one critical error. They had left me with my mind, my resolve, and the truth. They had used my love as a weapon against me. Now, I would use the law as my shield and my sword. The weeks following my meeting with Evelyn Reed were a strange, quiet purgatory. I was a general planning a war, moving pieces around a map that only I could see. I spent my days in physical therapy, pushing my body to its limits, and my nights in my brother's spare room, poring over the evidence Ms. Reed's team was compiling. Each new discovery, each highlighted bank statement, was another brick in the wall I was building around my heart, another stone for the catapult I was aiming at the life Mark and Jessica thought they were building. They had tried to contact me, of course, after a week of being blocked. They'd tried emailing. The messages were a pathetic mix of feigned remorse and thinly veiled threats. I forwarded every single one to Ms. Reed without replying. Their attempts to reach me were just more evidence for our case. The moment to launch our counteroffensive came on a Tuesday night, exactly 5 weeks after my world had imploded. The tip-off came from an unexpected source, our mutual friend, Liam, the one I had seen looking disgusted at the proposal party. "Clara," he said, his voice low and hesitant over the phone, "I don't know if I should be telling you this. And you can tell me to screw off if you want, but I think you need to know." "Know what, Liam?" I asked, my heart starting to beat a little faster. "They're throwing a party," he said, "Mark and Jessica. Tonight, at the apartment. They sent out an evite yesterday. They're calling it their New Beginnings party. It's supposed to be a combination engagement and housewarming party." I was silent for a moment, the sheer, unmitigated gall of it washing over me. A housewarming party, for my house, which they were celebrating having stolen from me. "Are you there?" Clara Liam asked, his voice full of concern. "I'm here," I said, and my voice was calm, my mind suddenly crystal clear. "Thank you, Liam. You did the right thing by telling me." This was it, the perfect stage, the moment of their greatest arrogance, their most public celebration of their betrayal. It was more than I could have hoped for. Ms. Reed had said we needed to choose our moment for maximum impact. They had just chosen it for us. I hung up with Liam and immediately dialed my lawyer. "Evelyn," I said, dispensing with formalities. "They're throwing a party, in my apartment, tonight." I could almost hear the cold, predatory smile in her voice. "Oh, are they?" she said, a hint of amusement in her tone. "How very thoughtful of them to gather all the witnesses in one place. It saves us the trouble of deposing them individually. I will have our process server meet us there at 9 p.m. sharp. Wear something that makes you feel powerful." My last call was to Daniel. "It's time," I said. He didn't need any other explanation. "I'll be there," he replied, at 8:45 p.m. We assembled in the lobby of my apartment building like a 3-person strike team. Me, in a sharp black pantsuit that felt like armor. Daniel, my loyal, solid older brother. His presence a silent promise of protection. And Ms. Reed, looking like she could dismantle a hostile corporate takeover with a single, icy stare. Her leather briefcase held firmly in her hand, a professional. Bonded process server stood discreetly behind her. We could hear the party from the elevator, the muffled thud of a bass line, the high-pitched shrieks of laughter. My laughter used to be a part of that sound in that apartment. The thought filled me not with sadness, but with a righteous, clarifying anger. We walked to my front door. I didn't knock. I reached into my purse, pulled out my own key, and slid it into the lock. The door swung open, and the 4 of us stepped inside. The scene was a bizarre replay of the one I had fled a month before. Only this time, the roles were reversed. The music, a loud pop song, faltered as people near the door saw us. A wave of silence radiated outwards from the doorway as heads turned. One by one, the laughter died, the dancing stopped. And there they were, in the center of it all, holding court, Mark and Jessica. He had his arm around her, a glass of champagne in his hand. She was wearing my engagement ring, a glittering trophy of her conquest, and she was laughing at something one of their friends was saying. Their smiles froze on their faces when they saw me. Mark's face went pale, a sickly, chalky white. Jessica's eyes widened in a mixture of shock and fury. They looked like burglars who had been caught red-handed by the homeowner in the middle of a party they were throwing with the stolen silver. I walked forward into the center of the room, my team following me. The crowd of guests parted before us like the Red Sea. Clara Mark finally managed to choke out, taking an involuntary step back. "What are you doing here?" A funny question to ask a woman in her own home, I said, my voice cool and even, carrying easily through the dead silent room. "But I can see how you might be confused. You've both made yourselves very comfortable here." I let my gaze sweep over the room, over the new art on the walls, the expensive-looking throw pillows on my sofa. "Mark, Jessica," I said, my tone turning formal, businesslike. "Sorry to interrupt your new beginnings party, but you seem to be operating under a few significant misapprehensions. I'm here tonight to clear them up." On cue, Mrs. Reed stepped forward. The process server, a large, impassive man, moved with her. "Mark Jensen," Ms. Reed said, her voice cutting through the air like a razor. The process server handed him a thick, legal-sized envelope. "You have been served." She turned to Jessica, whose face was now a mask of disbelief and dawning terror. "Jessica Miller, you have been served." He handed her an identical envelope. They both stared down at the documents in their hands as if they were live grenades. I had their attention now, and the attention of every single person in the room. "For those of you who were at my surprise party a month ago, welcome back," I said, my voice calm, but with an edge of steel. "For those of you who are new to this little drama, allow me to catch you up." I took a step forward, my eyes locked on Mark and Jessica. "The man you know as my former fiancé has been, for the past 6 months, systematically embezzling funds from my company and defrauding me of my personal savings. to finance the life he was planning with my former best friend. A collective gasp went through the room. Let me give you a few highlights, I continued, my voice merciless. The stunning 2-carat diamond engagement ring on Jessica's finger, it was purchased with my money, on my credit card. On a day Mark told me he was stuck in a meeting, Jessica's hand instinctively flew to her neck. As if to hide the ring, it was too late. All eyes were on it, the glittering symbol of her theft. The security deposit and first month's rent on the lovely new apartment you two were planning to move into next month. Paid for with a wire transfer from my savings account, disguised as a wedding venue deposit. I let that sink in. And this party, I said, making a sweeping gesture around the room. This food, this champagne you're all drinking. I can only assume this, too, was courtesy of the Clara Vance Benevolent Fund for Cheating Liars and Thieves. No one laughed. The silence was absolute. Mark was fumbling with his envelope, his hands shaking so badly he could barely open it. Jessica was just staring at me, her face a ruin of hatred and humiliation. These documents, I said, my voice reaching its final, damning crescendo, are a comprehensive civil lawsuit, demanding full restitution of every single cent you stole. They are a temporary restraining order, effective immediately, which forbids you from contacting me, my business, or my friends. And most importantly, for tonight, I said. A cold, triumphant smile finally touching my lips. They contain a legal, binding, 30-day eviction notice. I looked around at the stunned faces of their friends. This is my apartment, my name is on the lease, and your hosts have been living here under false pretenses, so I'm afraid the party's over. I turned my final gaze on the two people who had destroyed my world. They looked small, pathetic, and utterly defeated. You have 30 days to vacate my property, I said. I suggest you consult a lawyer, though I very much doubt you can afford a good one now. I didn't wait for a response. There was nothing more to say. My case had been presented. The verdict had been delivered. I turned to my brother and my lawyer. I think we're done here. And together. The three of us turned and walked out of the apartment. We left behind a room full of shocked witnesses and the wreckage of a life that was built on a foundation of lies. We left them in the ruins of their own party, with the taste of my champagne and the bitter reality of their consequences. As the door clicked shut behind me, I felt a profound sense of peace. They had tried to take my life from me, instead. I had just taken it back. We didn't stay to watch the fallout. We didn't need to. The bomb had been detonated, and our presence was no longer required for the ensuing destruction. I walked out of my apartment building, flanked by my brother and my lawyer, and I did not look back. The sounds of raised voices and a woman's hysterical sobbing began to leak out into the hallway, but I tuned them out. It was no longer my drama to manage. We went to a quiet, dark bar a few miles away. Daniel ordered me a whiskey. Neat. Mrs. Reed had a martini. We sat in a booth, the three of us, the adrenaline slowly draining away, leaving a strange, quiet exhaustion in its wake. You were magnificent, Clara, Daniel said. Raising his glass to me, his eyes were filled with a fierce, protective pride. Absolutely magnificent. Your composure under pressure was remarkable, Ms. Vance, Evelyn added. Her tone one of professional approval. Most clients in your position would have been screaming. Your cold, factual delivery was far more devastating. They made it easy, I said, swirling the amber liquid in my glass. When people are that arrogant, they build their own gallows. All you have to do is kick the stool out from under them. We sat in comfortable silence for a while. The war was over. I had won. But it didn't feel like a fist-pumping, triumphant victory. It felt like a quiet, somber relief. The relief of a surgeon after a long, grueling operation to remove a malignant tumor. The procedure was a success, but the patient was left with a scar and a long recovery ahead. The aftermath, as reported to me by Miss Reed over the following weeks, was as messy and pathetic as I had imagined. The party, of course, had imploded, according to our friend Liam. After we left, a screaming match of epic proportions had erupted between Mark and Jessica. He blamed her for being too obvious. She blamed him for being a weak-willed coward. Their new beginning had ended in a flurry of bitter, public accusations before their horrified guests had fled into the night. The eviction notice was legally ironclad. They had 30 days, I arranged, through Ms. Reed. Reed's office, for a moving company and a donation service to meet at the apartment on the final day. I gave them one instruction: clear it out. Everything. The sofa we picked out together. The dining table where we'd hosted dinner parties. The bed we had shared. I didn't want any of it. It was all tainted. The furniture was donated to a charity that helps families start over. The symbolism was not lost on me. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that their move-out was a humiliating spectacle. They were forced to pack their lives into cardboard boxes under the watchful eye of a building manager who had been legally notified of the eviction. The life they had stolen was reduced to a pile of belongings on the curb. The lawsuit was their undoing. Faced with incontrovertible evidence of fraud and embezzlement, they had no choice but to settle. Their love story, which had been built on the thrill of secret trysts and the foundation of my stolen money, could not survive the harsh reality of legal fees, restitution payments, and shared blame. They turned on each other with a ferocity that was almost poetic. The last I heard, they had broken up. He had moved back in with his parents, a disgraced 30-year-old. She had moved to a different state, hoping to escape the social and financial ruin she had helped create. They were a cautionary tale whispered about in our old circle of friends. I sold the apartment. I never set foot inside it again. The day the sale closed, I felt a profound sense of lightness, as if I had finally shed a heavy, haunted skin. The money from the sale, combined with the restitution payments that began to trickle in, went into a new account. I called it the Foundation Fund. For the next year, I focused on rebuilding, not my old life, but a new one, a better one, a stronger one. I poured my energy into my business, hiring 2 new developers and landing the biggest clients of my career. My work became my sanctuary, a place where logic reigned and my efforts produced tangible, honest results. But the real healing didn't happen at my desk. It happened on the other side of the world. 6 months after the eviction, I bought a one-way ticket to Thailand. I packed a single backpack and I left. For 3 months, I traveled alone. I hiked through jungles in Chiang Mai. I learned to scuba dive in the turquoise waters of Koh Tao. I ate street food in the chaotic, vibrant markets of Bangkok. For the first time in my life, I was completely, utterly on my own. I wasn't anyone's daughter, anyone's sister, anyone's fiancé, anyone's best friend. I was just Clara. And I learned that I was more than enough. I learned that my own company could be peaceful, not lonely. I learned that my own instincts were sharp and reliable. I learned to trust the kindness of strangers and, more importantly, to trust myself again. In a small, quiet temple overlooking the Andaman Sea, I finally let go of the last vestiges of my anger. I realized that Mark and Jessica weren't powerful monsters who had destroyed my life. They were just weak, greedy, and pathetic people. Their betrayal wasn't a reflection of my worthlessness. It was a reflection of their own emptiness. They had to steal a life because they were incapable of building one of their own. And by walking away, by choosing to build a new life from scratch, I had won in the most complete way possible. I came back a different woman. The scar was still there, a faint silvery line on my heart, but it no longer ached. It was just a reminder of a battle I had survived. I live in a new apartment now, a place filled with light and art from my travels. It's smaller than my old place, but it feels infinitely bigger because it is entirely my own. My business is thriving, my life is full, my chosen family Daniel, my real friends who prove their loyalty, even Miss Reed, who has become a trusted mentor, is my foundation. I didn't lose a fiancé and a best friend that night. I was liberated from a con man and a secret enemy. Their betrayal was a painful, devastating gift. It was the forest fire that cleared out all the dead wood and allowed for new, healthy growth. It was the surprise party that finally ended, leaving me in the quiet, peaceful, and promising aftermath of my own, authentic life. And so, this is my story, and this is my message to you, to anyone listening who has ever been made to feel small, who has ever had their trust shattered. Betrayal feels like an ending. It feels like a death. And in many ways, it is the death of the person you were, the person who did not know such a thing was possible. But after the death comes the rebirth. You will survive. You will stand up from the wreckage, dust yourself off, and you will start walking. and you will be stronger. You will be wiser, and your capacity for joy, a joy that is real and earned and entirely your own, will be boundless. The end of their story is the beginning of yours, and you get to write it yourself. Thank you for being with me on this insane journey. If you've ever had to burn your old life down to build a new one, I want to hear about it in the comments. Your story matters. Hit that like and subscribe button. And remember, sometimes the best surprise party is the one you throw for yourself, after you finally kicked out all the guests who didn't deserve to be there in the first place.